we can proceed to this evening's topic, which is maybe a little bit vague in terms of its titles. It could bear such titles as Psyche and Poetry, Psyche and Art, or if you are oriented very much in that direction, perhaps even Psychology and Art, because much of my inspiration for this, of course, proceeds from the one who has been my inspiration for so many years, while he was still alive, and subsequently, namely C.G. Jung. By the way, just to not to be tacitly or verbally accused of putting on the dog, which is a curious expression, by the way, or bragging, I have not met C.G. Jung in person. I saw him once in Zurich in the 1940s, when I snuck over from Austria over the border, and the Swiss border guards were quite tolerant, but they told you in their Swiss-Dutch accent, actually Swiss-Dutch is almost completely different language, and I told you, as long as you go back tonight, and I see you going back over the border, you can go. But if you don't, you better watch out. So obviously I went back. But we went to Zurich and we saw Dr. Jung with some of his friends coming out of the Jung Institute and then walking off some distance. That's as close as I got to him personally. But let us say from fairly early time of my studies, I became very fond of his approach, and I soon came to the conclusion that we are not dealing here with a psychologist after the fashion of Freud or some of the others, but someone who had a deep, really profound vision, a profound understanding of a deeper reality by way of the deeper reality within the human soul. And so I'm coming back a little bit to his material tonight as well as others, because one of the topics to which really all the early depth psychologists addressed themselves to was the creativity residing within the depths of the human psyche and its possible origins and its nature and its expression. Among the many other things that I did in my life, I was also a literary researcher, and I was attached to a man who was, at that time was really the top historical novelist in the United States, Irving Stone, and I worked with him mainly when he wrote his. These were biographical novels, fictional biographies. I think that's how Mr. Stone called them, of Sigmund Freud. So then, in spite of my strong Jungian proclivities and interests, for a few years, 2 or 3 years, I had to devote myself to Sigmund Freud. And I discovered, in the course of these researches, that all of these people, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, Wilhelm Stekel, early psychoanalysts and so forth, were extremely interested in art, in literature, in poetry. It's easy to get a projection, as we call it in psychology, onto Sigmund Freud and consider him a sort of prosaic old cigar smoker from Vienna, because, he definitely liked cigars, but his orientation wasn't really prosaic. And Freud also had a very strong poetic soul. The great difference between his approach to the poetry of the soul and that of C.G. Jung was that Freud stopped in terms of his approach, his analysis of, as they called it in Greek name, the Psyche, which is after all just a word for soul, at a relatively superficial level, at a level that was very much tied up with instinctuality, especially sexuality, and his ability and his willingness to look much deeper than that in terms of his psychological researches was not there. There, of course, was a great difference between Freud and Jung, who very soon in his own career, namely Jung, came to recognize that the psyche or soul or mind or whatever you want to call it, the non-physical component of the human being has tremendous profundity and tremendous depth, and it is not confined in any way to an acting out of the instincts or of reacting to the external world, but that it is very much like of course at a psychological level, at the spiritual level, it is very much like a road that goes further and further and further into a landscape, the power and the nature of which is fantastic. And that when one walks that road in one way or the other, one reaches into depths of meaning, depths of soul, which are certainly very different from the extroverted way in which generally the world and even many psychologists have viewed the activities of the human psyche. And it is perhaps because of this underlying reality that we find in the pioneers of depth psychology, psychoanalysis, analytical psychology, whatever we want to call them, we find in their lives and in their preoccupations and in the company that they kept a very strong inclination toward the artistic and the poetic and the literary. Sigmund Freud, who you might think spent his days and perhaps even more his nights thinking about sex, which he really wasn't the case at all, had carried Goethe's Faust, part 1 and part 2, with him wherever he traveled. And he always had the great epic drama of German literature next to his bed when he went to sleep. And similarly, even in the company that they kept, for instance, one of the best friends of Freud was, I just had her, a lady, anyway, an actress who was involved with all the artistic crowd, it was Lou Andrea Salome was her name, and she was a tall, formidable, buxom, and very good-looking lady, she was also the long-time girlfriend of one of the famous German poets of the time, but again I have to call on my geriatric memory, but in any event, she was the only person, and certainly the only woman, whom Freud always addressed in his letters and on communications as meine liebste Lou, my dear Lou, Lou Andrea Salome. In any event, so these people were connected with the area of the creative. But when it came to psychologically attempting to explain the manner in which the creative soul manifests and comes forth and is motivated, there they had, of course, different views. And once again, Freud's view was much more instinctual and social and extroverted in orientation, but Jung, as he proceeded with his investigation, came to the conclusion that ultimately the human psyche is not only creative, but that it is transcendentally creative. So by that I mean, in this case, that the ultimate origin, the fons and origo, as they put it in Latin, the fountain and origin of the creativity that comes forth from the soul, has origins that are beyond this world and beyond the human. And here maybe we can throw in a little bit of our own Gnostic propaganda, in the sense that it was really this view of C.G. Jung that qualified him as one who truly became, under some psychological guise, under some psychological garb, who became the great reviver of Gnosis in the modern, and perhaps now even call it the postmodern era. Because he said he was looking for people in the history of the world who were able to derive all of their inspiration, all of the energy of their life from, as he put it, from the psyche, and not from the external world. So that very few people in the history of the world have been that closely working with the interiority of their own nature as the old Gnostics, although of course there were always some here and there. And therefore Jung recognized quite early in his career that there is a connection between various forms of creativity, the creative expression of the human psyche, and transcendence. I think it was Joseph Campbell, who of course was also one of the circle of Jung quite early. It is that's where he got his original inspiration for his study of mythology, who referred to the valuable insights of life. Those may not be his words. Being in the nature of metaphor with a connection with, that's not his word either, of transcendence. A metaphor transparent to transcendence. This is Joseph Campbell's words. And in fact, we might say that if we take what I would consider to be the proper conclusions from Jung's insight, then what comes forth from the psyche, and especially what we would consider to be of a creative nature, is almost inevitably of the character of metaphors transparent to transcendence. This, of course, is what Jung felt had been the great difficulty with religion in the Western world, especially since the coming of Christianity, that certainly not entirely, but to a considerable extent, the character of spiritual creativity had changed and had subsided, although occasionally it made its appearance in various places, and that really therefore the origin of spiritual, or if you wish to use that word, religious creativity in the Western world was really of a Gnostic character. Now I can recommend one of the more easily handled volumes, because it is a small volume of Jung's collected writings, which is volume 15, entitled The Spirit in Man, Art and Literature. And there you find many very useful quotations by Jung, both in terms of distancing himself from the, as he often called it, the causative, I would say the cause-obsessed approach of psychologists to the creative process and to the psyche. Because let's say, Jung saw the creativity of the human, which of course manifests in art and literature and poetry. He saw this as having its root, having its connection, really for something beyond this world, beyond the ordinary. And Jung was one of the people who understood, and I will find a cute quotation for you from George Bernard Shaw that pertains to this, because he recognized that the creativity originates beyond the ego. And even deeper than that, that the creativity is the activity of the archetypes. Now you will have to pardon me because my this particular note is hidden here in a vast bunch of written cabbage. You know, in Hungary we often refer to a lot of papers as cabbage. In any event, Jung referred to this quotation, and quite rightly so. And these are a few lines from George Bernard Shaw's play St. Joan of Arc, which is of course quite famous. Where a French official is questioning Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc, somebody by the name of de Baudricourt. He speaks to Saint John about the source of her guidance, the source of her spiritual inspiration. Where do these things come from? And Joan of Arc says they come from God. And Robert de Baudricourt says nonsense. They come from your imagination. And Joan of Arc says, yes, Squire, that is where the messages of God come from. So this, of course, once again, if you study some of the researches, revelations, disclosures of great people, in this particular case, great mystics, people like Saint Albertus Magnus, I think he's the one who coined this, the Latin term imaginatio, which is, he said, the creative power of God, which you have the ability to help to turn into an image. So here is the origin of, let's say, the pictorial, the representative art. Here is the origin of great painters, of great sculptors, going clear back to the Greeks, various places, because the inspiration coming from the greatest depths of the psyche can be closed into imagery. And then we have an expression of the imagination. Now, of course, as time went on, especially the rationalistic era came and so forth, then imagination was not valued very highly. I was I will forever be grateful to my dear parents that they were people who valued imagination. Because, why? Because they had a son who was full of imagination. And they, instead of putting this son down and saying, no, well, you know, the kid has too vivid an imagination. They encouraged me and they helped me with it. Once again, I mean, these are the sins of old age that one reminisces, you know. But there were, I don't suppose that you will be horrified if I tell you that there was a period of years in my early life, I would say sort of beginning around the year 3.5 or 4 years, and then going on for years, when every single night before going to sleep, I found myself in the middle of extremely active and extremely colorful imagery that went on and on and on. Of course, you have to remember that these were the days before television. We didn't even know out in the countryside of Hungary as to what a motion picture was like, and so on and so forth. But let me tell you, it was so entertaining and exciting that I had a hard time going to sleep. And so finally my parents found ways to modify that a little bit, mainly by, we didn't have electric lights out in the country either, but we had kerosene lamps and candles, so that brought in a couple of brighter kerosene lamps, and when the magic darkness, which is after all the background of all magical evocation and invocation, that's why ceremonial magic is performed in the dark, maybe with a few candles. While in German we say im Dunkeln lässt sich munkeln, which is in the darkness things happen, because the darkness is a creative background for what is trying to happen and what may happen. And that is why we should value the night, and why we should value the part of the year which we will enter before terribly long with the autumnal equinox, when the evening comes soon, because that evening, that night, is the creative matrix, and you know, matrix is a Latin word that comes from mater, the mother. So it's the creative matrix that gives birth to the other reality, which I am bound to say, on the basis of having been so attracted to it all my life, it's a reality that in many ways is a heck of a lot more interesting and nice than this one, you know. And it's real. Believe me, it is real. So Jung could discern that this has a great deal to do with art in its various forms. And of course, one of the principal expressions, as he said, is religion. But while religion, with Gnostics, Hermetics, and mystics in general, religion comes forth from the depths of the unconscious. It pours and bubbles forth. And then, if the ego is capable of doing that, it can be translated into imagery, into story, into words. While that is true, very often, and we always have to be careful with that, we have to be careful with that in our attitude toward art and art, literature, poetry also, and various other ideas that owing to the extroversion, the extroverting tendency of our psyche, especially in living in an extroverted culture as we are, which means just turning outward, we project these internal realities and impulses, visions. We project them out onto something physical, and one of good examples of it is much of certainly religion in the West, and some of philosophy too, because as Jung points out, even in connection with art, religion and art now that's not very artistic, but it will go away. It will go away. So religion and art also originate with what Jung calls the archetypal psyche. And the archetypes, the Urbilder in German, ancient image, archaic, the archetypes are the carriers, you might say. They are the messengers, the angels, because angelos in Greek means a messenger. So they are the messengers of the incredible creative and transformative energy that dwells, or perhaps to which our own psyches act as openings, as doorways, as portals. Because if you go deeply enough that road into the mystery, you soon exit the realm of the ego, and you soon exit the various other functions of consciousness, and you find yourself in a realm very, very different. And from that realm, in order to be recognized, in order to interact with, requires our contact with what Jung came to call the archetypes. Those are the ancient, the primordial, certainly pre-personal and even pre-human images which are there, but with which we can have contact, and which we are then able to interact with, and we can even modify to some extent. So there is a profound and a mysterious process here within which we are involved. In fact, I don't want to refer to my notes at this point. Jung also said that the creative process, in which of course art, poetry, all the creative processes are involved, that these activities, these upwellings from the profundity of the psyche, they do two things. It would I think take a good deal of explaining to try to analyze the details. He said they differentiate and they unite. Now, differentiation and uniting appear to be two diametrically opposed processes. Right? A differentiation comes from a unitary background and then becomes the many. The one becomes the many. But these then in turn need to be united, and they have the capacity to then relate to each other and ultimately to unite. These are also, I feel at least, these psychic processes are very closely related to the great art, as it was called, of alchemy. Because there is the breaking up of reality, there is the nigredo, and before that the reality perceived by the senses and by consciousness break up in order to develop further and to relate themselves to. That's why, let's see, you have come across that, I'm sure, in various sources, that there is a sort of little diagrammatic attempt to explain how alchemy works. And before the alchemy takes place, we are a square. No, I'm not insulting anybody that you're a square, but in any event, the square. It's just a symbol, and the square has, of course, 4 corners, and these are closely related to the 4 functions of consciousness, of the ego, of sensation, feeling, thinking, and intuition. And there we are in this square. We are locked up in there. And reminds me of a terrible story from the Hungarian Air Force. I really don't know whether, my uncle, my mother's brother, youngest brother, was Air Force officer, and a man very much taken to humorous things. And he told us that at a particular Air Force base where he was stationed and so forth, the soldiers, the airmen, brought in a duck. Wow, wow. Well, after all, it's a bird, it's a good symbol for the Air Force. And then it was a small duck. They placed the duck in a square box, and they kept feeding the duck. And I don't think they let the duck out very much. And he says, when at the end, we had a square duck. So the duck grew into this box and became a square. What this has to do with Jung or with art or literature, that's a project that I still have to work on, But in any event, so we are a little bit like that duck when we are locked into our ego, as most of us are most of the time, very much time. And then in order to transform and in order to become Campbell's words, to transparent to transcendence, that square has to be broken up, and so it breaks up, and there is a creative crisis. But if things go well and if a person has an orientation toward that sort of thing, and this is terribly important, whether you are looking at these matters artistically, or whether you are looking at them mystically or psychically, the principle is very much the same, that you have to trust the process. You have to trust the psyche. Otherwise, what is happening to you is going to become a psychosis, and you are going to have to go to the contemporary psychiatrists who are not like Jung or not even like Freud, and all they'll give you is pills. Now, I don't mind pills if they accomplish a good purpose, but these in this case don't. And so then we have we have, let's say, the broken up pieces of the square floating around, swimming in the alchemical retort. And that is then the process of the darkening, the process of the nigredo. But not to go through all of it now, because its relationship is really not direct to what we are dealing with. The important thing is that there is a power there which caused first a break, a disruption, and then is causing the reassembly of that which has been disrupted and works for wholeness. And both of these are important. And that is why we have to, if at all possible, we have to question the consensus reality within which we live. Because if we accept the image that the culture, that the external world presents to us, and if we accept that as a reality, then there is no further development. And this is, of course, the great danger, especially with a culture which volens, nolens, wishing or doing becomes, strives toward materialism of one kind or the other. And that is the kind of culture within which we live. So when there is some issue, you go to the experts, whatever they happen to be. We've heard a lot from the medical experts over the last couple of years or so, but any other experts, and what the experts will tell us, that what is happening to us is something material. And that will be a falsehood. Because even when there are material processes taking place, there is always a psychic, a soul component. And if we are, if we have the right view of these things, then we don't accept that, but that we will look deeper and deeper. And eventually we will come up with factors, with energies, with images, with inspirations, with ideations which are not of the material world, and which are actually ultimately far more important for us than the material world. Now, I don't want to wax preacherish here too much, but let's say all the scriptures of the great religious traditions have statements that are similar to the one that we find in the New Testament, wherein the teacher says that what profited a man, what good is it to anyone when he wins the whole world but loses his soul? And this is exactly what we need to keep in mind, so that the constant extraversion, the wrongful assumption that the physical is not only a reality, but the reality, this can be very, very deleterious. And as Jung very beautifully, I have a whole bunch of great quotations marked here, but I thought to myself, what the heck, this is not such a very large book, this is the easiest reading in terms of its volumes. You can read Jung, directly too, but what Jung continues to indicate that there are, these are my words, there are channels of expression. There are avenues through which the great, the magnificent power from within expresses itself. And these are the ones that we need to keep close to. And certainly there are religious, there are magical, there are occult avenues of that sort. They are all expressions, or let's say attempts, and because our ego has to be somewhat involved, attempts on the part of our personality to try to bring forth and to process these incredible energies from within. And that is of very, very great importance. And then, and that's why this little volume is written, then he indicates that it's not only religion or magic or alchemy, the occult arts and so forth, which he recognized. After all, he knew a great deal about it, and he certainly, Jung owned at the time of his death all the important and even some of the non-important works that have been published about Gnosticism in either German or in English. A whole library, and precisely because he was looking for those people who had a sense of the soul, who had a sense of this other dimension, and who were trying to deal with that and to derive their life and their conscious energy from that, let's say, at that area of reality. But then Jung very correctly and very fairly also points out that one of the areas, one of the fields where this overflow, the bubbling stream from the deep unconscious, which is just a psychological expression, let us say the very depths of the soul comes forth, also manifests through the arts. Visual arts, music, and of course literature, the word. Jung has a great deal to say about the word, the logos, which is of course the Greek term for word, but in it, when the philosophers starting with the pre-Socratics and then going on with Plato and right down to the early Christian era, have expressed that the logos is of tremendous importance, the word, because it is the articulated expression of the profound consciousness. What we might say, the spirit, that which is beyond the psyche, when the spirit wants to express itself, it needs a modicum of communication. And so that is why the language, the word, is and has been considered Going clear back to the Vedas, all the Sanskrit literature and others, the word has been considered to be of divine origin. The letters that Sanskrit is written in are called in Sanskrit Devanagari, and that means the letters of the gods, because the language, the written language, has been given to humanity by the gods, because through this we can come closer and closer to meaning. And therefore the word, the verbal expression, and then literature. What is literature? That which is written. The written word is of tremendous importance and a great expression of interior creativity. And that is why I think this is an area of human endeavor that should not be neglected, and is being greatly neglected today. There has always been in every country and every tradition, there has been a common vernacular expression of language. That there are mundane things in life, and it is legitimate that they should have a mundane expression. It wouldn't do us a great deal of good if a can of beans had a highfalutin poetic name. It would still be a can of beans. But there is also an other. There is that which is capable of beautifully and meaningfully, those things are very important, beautifully and meaningfully expressing deeper understanding, deeper meaning, spiritual meaning. And that is that needs to be kept in mind, and that is of very great importance. And that is also another area where we need to make and keep the language important and sacred. And to recognize that with the power of the word, which we can utter, which we can write down, which we can write with illumination into an old codex and everything, that these are expressions of profound meaning. And once we come to recognize this profundity, this depth and this power in the word, then we also begin to see it elsewhere. A musical note, same thing. Language, the language of, the ancients would refer to it as the harmony of the spheres. The music of the music that comes to us by way of the stars and by way of all the mysterious elements that are in the world, and that come to us that way. But we have to be there listening, we have to be there appreciating, and not allowing these matters to be debased. And that is why we need to avail ourselves of the sources of inspiration, transformation, which are available to us, and which of necessity have have come back from the past, and not place irrelevant judgments upon them. I don't know, Franz Liszt, my favorite Hungarian composer, Franz Liszt or Schubert or Bach or so, well, these were all Europeans, Why should we be listening to their music? Well, folks, it's not their music. It's the music of the spheres which comes to you, and then it is your music. And the same with many, many other things. And I grew up in a country and in a period of history all of which unfortunately came to a very bad end, where, let's say, out in the country in Hungary was compulsory school for children, and let's say, I think in the beginning everybody, whether their father was a blacksmith or an agricultural laborer, everybody had to go to school for 8 years. Then I think that was the limit. Now, in those 8 years, these children, village children, not only knew how to do elementary mathematics and how to write and so forth, but they had memorized a very large number of the products of the Hungarian poets. Till the end of their days, they were able to recite some of the great works of poetry that we had. What else? They may not have been people who had big libraries at their disposal, but they were reading. You walked on the village street on a nice sunny day or something, old fellows there with their long pipes in their mouth, so reading books. And the books were largely the books of Hungarian literature, of our great novelists, of our great poets, and so forth. And this did something for the people. They had a connection not only with the great artists and intellects of the past, but with the kind of creativity that is involved. And this is very, very important. So we have been given modalities whereby we can move closer than we ordinarily would be otherwise to transcendence. These are the metaphors that are transparent to transcendence. And we ought to utilize these. And when we do, we will thereby be enriched. We will have a vocabulary and actually we will have opened doors which open into a realm of meaning that comes from beyond this world, beyond the physical, but which is able to enliven our physical lives and give us the kind of interior motivation, the kind of transcendental fire that burns within and that can be brought forth, and whereby we can warm ourselves in the cold, in the frosty atmosphere of this world, where so many beautiful things, so many meaningful ideas, so much noble sentiment, such beautiful works of art are all neglected and eventually thrown onto the trash heap. We should not allow that to happen. And Jung has also very correctly pointed out that the practice of the arts, let's say the composing and executing of music, the painting, the sculpting, and of course the art of the word, the poetry, the writing, and so forth, that all of these point to something beyond the ordinary world. They bring us a feeling, they bring us a touch that there is something other than what we constantly encounter. And that is why these modalities should be cultivated, should be understood, and should be therefore available to us for the expression, for the growth, for the transformative movement into a greater direction of the interiority of our being. And I shudder at what is going on in our culture, because everything that is valued is material. Everything that is valued is material. Now I'm going to say something that's going to make you mad, but well, maybe not mad, because that's a pathological, psychopathological condition. But let's say, maybe annoy you, and that is, our health is also material. It is the condition of a material thing. And when one way or the other we become obsessed with health, whether it is health foods or whether it is shielding ourselves from an epidemic or whatever, we have concentrated the energy of our soul on a material thing. So, a very good little exercise is sort of a little reviewing of conscience in the evening. How many of my actions, how many of my thoughts, how many of my feelings during the day were directed to purely or largely material things? And if they have been squandered. They have been expanded on something that does not deserve it. Now, of course, we have to be sensible about these sorts of things. I mean, I'm never going to eat a dinner if I don't cook, or we don't cook some material thing on that stove and then materially ingest it, and so on and so forth. Sure, there are many. Life is full of trivialities. Life is full of the commonplace. Life is full of situations and ideas and preoccupations which do not deserve that much preoccupation, and therefore we have to withdraw from them. So look, that's not what I want to think about. Of course, it's very, very difficult, especially when we are in conditions like we are now, where there are various crises that are going on, and the the media and so forth. But you know, even now, with television and with the doggone computers, I always like to say something derogatory about them. Because these are the false gods of our culture. And all of these things, they are not as important as we think they are. And so we ought to be able to step away from them and I'm thinking of the end of a 19th century poem, but it will come to me, wherein the particular verse ends, I walk amidst the eternal ways, and what is mine will know my face. Mm-hmm. We have to do that, and we can. We are not material beings, neither are we mechanical beings. We are something else. It's difficult to define, but it is extremely important, it's extremely valuable, and ultimately it brings a state of consciousness that is happy, that is serene, that feels an accomplishment, and that is conscious to some degree and extent of its own transformation. And this is extremely important. And as Jung points out in volume 15, we need certain stimuli for that. And he indicates that psychology, his own psychology too, analytical psychology or so, is not going to do it. Mm-hmm. Psychology, and the study of psychology is not a sufficient stimulus to bring that kind of interior transcendental reach about. Yeah, well, we can understand certain things, we can learn some things about the structure of the psyche and how it works and so forth. But what is important is that which is beyond psyche, which we enter through the psyche, and then we are in a great and different and marvelous condition. And the stimuli which we may avail ourselves of every day and every evening are what? Literature, poetry, music, the visual arts, and these instrumentalities have been the life-giving nourishment of humanity from the beginning of time. If you go to the British Museum, which is a city in itself, fabulous, fabulous place, and I think they are still there. You go and see the Elgin marbles. These are, marble sculptures and decorative objects that have been brought over from Greece. And of course now the Greeks say, well, they're ours, and give it back to us. But you know what, friend Greeks, if the British hadn't taken them over, they would have blown up, they would have exploded, because the Turkish conquerors of Greece had explosives under the ground, right under where these marbles were. And not very long after the marbles were transported from Greece, the area where they were went up. In those days it was gunpowder, maybe already some dynamite, So, but you look at that and you say, why did these people create such beauty? Why? Why? Because the beauty nourished their soul. Why did the gods have beautiful statues? Why did Orpheus was always portrayed with the lira? I don't mean the lira of the Italian currency at the present time, but the lyre, because Orpheus is one of the gods who brought music into the world. And so the arts, whether they are visual or whether they are audible or whatever they may be, are the stimuli whereby we grow toward transcendence. And that is why we have to pay attention to these. We have inherited a great treasure in our culture. Every culture has. We have inherited a great treasure in the artistic creations of the past. And maybe of the present as well, but we are not so conscious of them yet. And so we need to avail ourselves of it. We need to displace the concern with, I mentioned one of the words before, with what who it was, Søren Kierkegaard, I think, called the triviality of everydayness. Mm-hmm. Only a gloomy Dane can come up with that kind of an expression, But they make good schinken, good ham, which is, it may be material, but when a material thing tastes good and so forth, it should be appreciated. But the triviality of everydayness, the routine of these trivialities is a terrible thing. It draws us away from that which is meaningful, that which allows us to transform, which allows us to participate in our alchemy and to move toward and into the greater life. We have, I think, a considerable amount of evidence and material indicating that once we put this physical body aside, and this is, I think, very important, that is certainly only the end of that physical body, and that there is something else there, and something that is really anything but trivial, anything but everyday-like. And maybe it behooves us right now, while we are still here in the body, to move a little more closer to that. Because the world of the spirit, the world of the angels, this is the world that transcends this one, and that leads to higher recognition beyond itself. So we live in an era that ought to be, but unfortunately doesn't really live up to it, that ought to be the era of the individual. We are not in the Middle Ages where if we don't pray a certain way, if we don't do certain things, we are going to be turned over to the unholy Inquisition. Fortunately, these things don't exist. But we have locked ourselves into a prison of materiality and of triviality, and only the great contributions of those who have gone before and who have presented us with the marvelous poetry. I mean, I can swear a holy oath that I would consider this world a lot more impoverished than it already is, and it's pretty impoverished, if there were no Goethe, if there were no Schiller, if there were no great composers, if the heritage of beauty, which leads into the other world. You know, if when Mr. Hodgson, who on the basis of whose perception some of these windows were made in stained glass also, Mr. Hodgson and Dora Kuntz, who was also a great seer, I really knew her a little bit better, they said, you know, the salutary effect of beautiful music on the psyche is very, very great. And they very much agreed with some of these people in the last 50 years or so who tried to develop musical therapies and things of that sort. But what do you think that good music was all along? A therapy for the darkness and for the suffering and the evils of this world. That's what it was, and that's what it still is. And similarly, the visual arts. To some extent, you know, even the motion picture at one time, when there was still, well, let's say, a bit more beauty and a bit more sense in it. And let's not forget the great and wonderful invention of the human, the book. I think that I myself, number of other people whom I have known, my family, and so on, you know, living under very difficult circumstances during and after the war, under the horror of the hammer and sickle and things of that. If we hadn't had at least a few books that we liked and that gave us a good feeling, we may not have had anything to eat for a couple of days. We may not have had any clothing that really protected us, but we had something. We had something. We had a treasure which was there and which made us feel entirely in an entirely more salubrious manner. And so instead of quoting things and instead of reading to you my notes, this is what I'm trying to convey. Pay attention to the arts, pay attention to poetry, pay attention to music, pay attention to that which is beautiful, and be grateful for the beauty that has been created for us. So some of the most insightful and wise people whom I have met in my lifetime, and you all meet them at one point or the other, had also a very sharp, a very great aesthetic sense. One of them being Manly Palmer Hall. You should have seen the transcendental delight in his face when he was taking out some of the Japanese antiquities that he bought on his vacation, and he was taking them out of the case and displaying them and so on. And And his great desire, which I can testify to, that anything that he wrote and published should be, if at all possible, should be in a nicely bound, nicely illustrated and beautifully printed book. There's not enough just to have the printer's ink there, but it should be beautiful. It should reflect some of the intention of the one who wrote it and the people who put it together, and not merely serve some kind of pseudo-practical purpose. These things are extremely important, and they are increasingly diminishing in our world. But they will diminish only if we permit them to diminish. And the culture will further deteriorate and become really terrible if we don't stop that deterioration. But we can do it. Why? Because we can cultivate the culture. We can appreciate what is available to us. We can direct our attention in that direction, and we are assured, even by the greatest explorer of the psyche in modern time, Carl Gustav Jung, that if we do that, our soul will be better off. It will be healthier. It will have meaning. Through the appreciation and the dealing with beauty, it can be stimulated toward its own alchemical transformation and will become its own glorious, beautiful, healing, transforming philosopher's stone. May we address ourselves to that to the best of our ability, and if we do, we will be well rewarded. And maybe not only ourselves, but others, to whom the treasures of our ancestors, the treasures of our culture, will become more openly available and will arouse appreciation and a movement toward transcendence through beauty. Let's try to address ourselves to that, and if we do, we will be well rewarded, and I think that we will have paid homage to those who have created beauty and meaning and wonder for generations to come, and for human beings in every place. And I hope that maybe we have stimulated that a little bit tonight, and I thank you very much.